I first went to sleepaway camp in 1968, the summer before I turned 10 years old. The brochure for Big Island Farm Camp advertised sports, camping, and cultural activities, and had something to appeal to every member of my family. My dad was happy that there was a section that said Jewish culture, including Friday night services. My brother looked forward to playing paddleball. My mother saw a section about farm animals and how children enjoyed learning to care for them. And so that prompted her to fill my trunk in a style that I refer to as Barbie Goes to the Dude Ranch, complete with things like pink seersucker tops and cute little overalls with buttons shaped like sunflowers. I suppose I should be grateful that she didn't throw in a straw hat. As for me, I looked forward to two things. One of them was swimming, because I had just read the Bobbsey twins go to the beach and they were trying to master the Australian crawl, which I didn't really know what that was, but I was sure it was a lot harder than the technique my mother had taught us in our above-ground pool. And the other one was horseback riding. Now, my sole experience with horses had been having once talked my grandfather into paying for me to go on the pony ride at the Bronx Zoo. But I was sure that by the end of the summer, I would be galloping over rugged terrain on the back of a spirited black steed named Demon. Camp proved a little bit different than I had expected. My brother earned some quick fame and notoriety for one thing alone: his appetite. Nobody was allowed to leave the table until everybody in their bunk was done with a meal, at which point everybody raised their hands and waved and called out to the camp director, "Knit one, purl two, Marvin, yoo-hoo," before being dismissed. My brother, despite being really skinny, could eat huge amounts of food, and one day set a new camp record by eating 57 pancakes for breakfast. His bunkmates just sat there for at least an hour just staring at him. I did not earn any particular fame or notoriety at camp, unless it was perhaps for crying with frustration, because what I had ignored in all of that planning was that I was a shy, fearful, and unathletic child, and despite all of my thoughts that the 200-mile drive from Long Island to Windsor, New York, near Binghamton, would somehow transform me, it hadn't. The thing I was really good at was arts and crafts, but there's only so much copper enamel little pins you can make to give away to your elderly aunts. And I'm still not entirely sure what anybody did with the 17 and a half miles of plastic lanyard that I wove that summer. As for swimming, we did have open swim every day, but there were maybe 3 actual lessons the entire summer, so I left no more enlightened about the Australian crawl than when I had arrived. And in terms of horseback riding, instead of a black steed named Demon, I walked around in circles through the paddock on the back of an old gray horse named Teddy. So I learned a few things in camp during the summer. I once got all the way up to 9sies in a game of jacks, for example. We put on a production of Oliver for Parents' Weekend, and I still know all of the lyrics to Papa. And I learned not to let my mother pick out my wardrobe. I also learned about something called Color War, which was one of the big events of summer camp. The camp was divided into 2 teams, one green, one white for the camp colors, and competed at everything from archery to volleyball. There were, to things that I was better at, songs and a skit. Our skit was called Devil in Wonder Camp and involved a poor devil child who was sent to camp for the summer, and at the end ended up crying out to his parents, "Mommy, Daddy, I don't want to be at camp. I want to go back to hell." The next summer, my parents selected Camp Birchbrook, on the shores of Lake Kezar in New Hampshire. Kezar is apparently from a Native American word that means sea of leeches. There was no swimming pool there, so I had to brave the leeches in order to pass the deep water swimming test, which is what you needed in order to be able to take out a rowboat, which I had become obsessed with that summer. Horseback riding was an optional extra that my parents had not paid for, so I spent more time going and walking into town to the general store where you could buy soda from a machine. That was a great novelty to me. Buy comic books and spend the afternoon happily reading the wanted posters at the post office section and seeing which pictures looked like counselors at the camp. The biggest event of that summer was the moon landing, and all 100 or so campers gathered around a 13-inch television to see Neil Armstrong take his one big step for mankind. Camp Birchbrook took color war just as seriously as the moon landing, and we went through all of the usual archery to volleyball. The biggest event, which ended color war, was something they called the Apache race, which was essentially the world's most ridiculous relay race. The bunks there were named after different types of wood, and it started with a redwood girl shooting an arrow into the archery target. That was followed by 3 oakwood boys leapfrogging across the softball field. There were all sorts of silly events involved. I was one of the redwood girls who had to make a bunk with hospital corners while singing Yankee Doodle. And it finally ended with 2 Ashwood girls burning a rope over a fire that had been built by 2 Elmwood boys. I came back from camp at the end of the summer, not having been transformed at all by the journey to New Hampshire. And I subsequently went to lots of other summer camps and summer programs, and I've moved house a number of times. And still, despite everything that I've experienced, I still always expect that the change of scenery will somehow turn me into another person. The other day, I got a spam email with the title, Summer Camp for Adults. I'm fairly sure that I should go to this. Because no matter what, I'm sure that going off to summer camp for adults will make me 6 inches taller, 50 pounds thinner, give me better hair, and help me straighten out my house and the rest of my life. Thank you.